And whether it's a temporary failure or permanent failure, there's so much we could do to learn from it and bring it back into the operational excellence lean community and say, okay, this was a sophisticated operational excellence system, and here's how we failed. Here's what we could have done differently, so that we as organizations and leaders can move forward.
Welcome to A State of Readiness, a podcast set as a fireside chat with business leaders to discuss what it takes for a company to be in a state of readiness and become a high-performance organization, with your host, Joseph Paris.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of State of Readiness. I'm your host, Joseph Paris. My guest today is Steven Leuschel, Director of Operational Excellence at Guardian Elder Care, a network of facilities located in Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Eastern Ohio. Steven has published several books, including Lean Culture Change, Using a Daily Management System, and its companion Executive Guide to Lean Culture Change, Why Lean Transformation Fails, Common Challenges to Adopting New Leadership and Management Systems, and his latest book, Sensei Secrets, Mentoring at Toyota Georgetown, a study with former members of Toyota Georgetown startup years and their mentor relationships with their senseis. He was previously an adjunct professor at St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and operational excellence at Indiana Regional Medical Center located in Indiana, Pennsylvania. He earned his bachelor's in liberal arts and his master's in business management operational excellence at St. Vincent, and his PhD in business administration and leadership studies at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He is married and a father of four, and his goal is to climb the highest point in all 50 states. Welcome, Steven, to State of Readiness. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, we've known each other for quite some time, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been quite a few years, I'd say.
Yeah. And we met face-to-face at your alma mater there at St. Vincent's in Latrobe, PA.
Yeah, I think that was, 2 or 3 years ago at the North American Summit, Operational Excellence Summit.
Yeah, that's correct. The Kennametal Academy for Operational Excellence, or what was it called again?
Yeah, Kennametal Center for Operational Excellence.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Yeah. So that was, I call that the before times, before COVID, when we can actually,
when we were able to get together and see each other face to face.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time and joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you're a bit of a prolific writer. I mean, you've got at least 4 books, and I think that you're working on a 5th that you had mentioned.
Yeah. So I had started writing, I think, probably 2000. I don't remember, but I think this first book was published in 15 or 16. And, as we're going to talk about the transformation curve, there's so much to it that I've kind of made a commitment to always be working on a book at some point in time. So pretty much since my first book, I've always been working on had a book in progress. Now it takes a little bit longer than normal because I don't do it full time, and I've got 4 kids at home, but, it's a fun journey to write a book. Yeah.
I've written just the one, and it was a 3-year project for me. You're a little bit more accelerated than I am in the book writing world. And the funny thing is, when I my first book came out on the shelf, and people are saying, "Hey, great job, Joe, but when's your next one coming out?" It's like, dude, I just spent 3 years of my life, working on this one, and I'm not going to be writing another one for quite some time.
It's tough. It's tough. I know, especially when I did this one here, all the graphics I did as well, and I started the second version of this, or the second, I guess not the second version, the follow-up to this book. As soon as I was done, I think I've got 2 chapters written, and they've been sitting on the shelf for probably 5 years or so. So that'll be another one that comes out hopefully at some point.
So, how did you, you started off your studies at St. Vincent's in liberal arts, and earned your bachelor's in liberal arts there. But what made you go into specifically operational excellence? Business management, of course, but then specifically, operational excellence.
I actually, a long time ago, I started out as a biology major. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then at some point I switched to business. And when I switched into the business school, Gary Quinlivan, who's the dean of the business school, said, you ought to try out and look at this operational excellence. It was fairly new at the time. I believe I'm the first or second master's level graduate. So that's how new the program was. And I met Roger Lewis, who used to work for Toyota, who was the executive in residence at the time. And after meeting him and David Adams, who ran the Center for Operational Excellence, and Doc Kunkel, who ran the master's program, I started with operational excellence, and it's, kind of the rest is history from there. Started working at the center, which, you and I attended the conference years later, but we were doing coaching and consulting work and training, and, everything that I do from an operational excellence standpoint really goes back to the Kennametal Center for Operational Excellence at St. Vincent.
Now, St. Vincent's is not a very large college. I mean, how many students are enrolled there? Do you have any?
The last time I checked, when I was there, I think there was about 1,600. I think they've grown considerably, at least from the master's program standpoint. But I think undergrad is probably around that. They might have gotten a little bit bigger, but I think it's still around 1,600 for the 4 classes. So it's about 400 per class.
Right.
At least when I was there, I think we had right around 400.
Now, it's one of the only colleges I know of that have actually a program for operational excellence.
Yeah, there's not many out there. I think Ohio State has one, and St. Vincent, and that might be about it. There might be some newer ones that are cropping up because it's luckily it's getting more popular, lean management and operational excellence both. So I think there might be more schools adopting it, hopefully.
Now, it seems like even though you wanted to be a doctor or thought you wanted to be a doctor and you're focused on biology, it seems like a lot of your application of operational excellence has been in the medical field.
Yeah, I was, at KCOE, we were coaching and consulting both in the healthcare field and manufacturing. So I was working at pulp mills, paper mills, powdered metal plants, as well as hospitals. And when I switched to Indiana Regional Medical Center full time, I just got to focus on hospitals and healthcare. So it's a very different animal than manufacturing. There's a lot more processes and systems and people, cultural issues. So healthcare, as you know, it's a tough field, especially after the last 2 years.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment, because I think your latest, your present position is in at Guardian Elder Care, which is for the elderly, and they are particularly hard hit. I know it's all in the papers in New York. What happened there, but before we get into that, when we're trying to apply the principles of leans, and I know that you're lean, and I know that you're a big fan of Toyota and lean processes, but in the medical industry, in the healthcare industry, healthcare is an inexact science. Not like manufacturing widgets, where you could look at tack time and eliminate waste and try to standardize everything. There's less scope of standardization, I would assume, in healthcare because of the unknown unknowns when you're treating any given patient.
Yeah, but you can standardize things like vendors. If you have, let's pick a hospital system that has 6 hospitals, maybe you want to standardize vendors so that you can have a better opportunity to stand processes and procedures, or you standardize, standing orders on if patient has X, these are the orders that we're going to use. It doesn't mean you can't customize those or add on to them. Right. But, I think standards are very important in healthcare.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying there might be less scope of how much you can standardize in healthcare as opposed to
every person's different. Yeah.
Now, and I would also assume like, nurses stations and pharmaceuticals and distribution of pharmaceuticals and whatnot, those things can be fairly standardized using, lean inventory control methods.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, but you'll never get to the point where there's tack time and you've got a patient moving like a car down the assembly line. That's hopefully that's never going to happen. I don't know that would be applicable. So,
yeah, I just don't, since since the product is the patient, it's very, and each patient is, their circumstances are unique unto themselves. I can't imagine that everything can be standardized right down to, the last bolt, if you will. But, the mechanism by which the patient moves through the processes should largely be standardized. When I was in Germany, and I'm still in Germany, right? I had a umbilical surgery and, umbilical hernia. And I was, I'm a process guy too, right? So I'm looking for the mistakes. I'm looking for opportunities for improvement. And these folks are incredibly efficient. I mean, I was wheeled around from station to station in pre-op, and they had this big Tyvek envelope that was, and on it was printed a series of barcodes. And I was basically routed from station to station, and they would peel off a barcode and put it on a chart or put it on a vial or whatever it was, so that before I got into the OR, the people were able to see that everything that was supposed to be done for me or to me leading up to the operation was in fact done. And of course, it was a way of capturing, what was going to be billed later on.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool that they were able to do that. And I know, from an OR standpoint, there's a lot of standardization that can happen, that should happen. One of the things we did at Indiana Regional, we mapped out the process of preoperative elective appointments. And we found, for, let's just make this up and say knee surgery. Well, I'd have to go to the lab, and then a different day I'd have to go see the doctor again. And then a different day I'd have to go get my H&P, and I'd have to go see the anesthesiologist. So, when we looked up at the board after we did the value stream map, there was just, it was efficient for the hospital system, but it wasn't efficient for the patient doing all these multiple trips. Right. So we combined it all into one, and you come in, get everything done, you're ready for surgery. So it really increased the patient experience, which is what this is all about, making things easier for the patient as well.
Right. Now, does Guardian have an electronic medical record system in place?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you're able to capture basically in real time all the activities related to a patient, both what has happened and what is supposed to happen.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Super.
Yeah.
How long were you there when they implemented it?
No, that was in place before my time. So,
okay.
But I was involved in another EMR switchover, which is a huge project. It may take a year in implementation. And I think it's a really good opportunity. And I had a family member that went through this as well in a manufacturing setting. And what they do is they'll come in, depending on what EMR you use or what system you're using, they'll come in and map all your processes and put them in the new system. And one of the things that most companies do, they try to shorten that timeline and just get the processes in place the way they are and put them on the new system instead of taking that extra time. And when you map out the processes to put them in, you should improve them as well and then put them in the new system.
Right.
And I think a lot of people miss that boat just because there's such a time crunch. You're paying for consultants. So the quicker you do it, the better. But there's a pretty big opportunity if you're switching EMRs.
So let's talk about COVID and elder care. Obviously this is a black swan event. Nobody really had it on the radar. I don't even know if hospitals planned for such contingencies or events in their in their readiness protocols. what was Guardian's experience to the extent that you could share it?
It was, I believe we really got ahead of it as much as anybody could. But there was hospital systems out there. I had friends that worked in the ER that texted me that said they had a bunch of N95s in the ER that were just stolen. So not only did you have to deal with finding the PPE and getting it there, you had to deal with securing it, making sure you had enough, ordering systems to put those in place. I've heard from other systems where there was one, again, back to PPE, because that was my primary function, was purchasing and distributing PPE for the first few months. One hospital system had a gymnasium full of PPE. So one of the things that we had to do was figure out, okay, we bought all this PPE. Now, how do we distribute it to all of our homes? So we, we're able to figure that out. And now we've got a pretty sophisticated system in place, which is, I think there's a lot of learning from it as well that we can apply it to other processes now moving forward.
Right. Now, you do probably a lot of in-home care also?
No, we primarily do SNFs, skilled nursing facilities.
Okay. So you didn't have to worry about, the remote activities that some other elder care networks would have to deal with.
We did for a little bit at the time. And we got PPE, make sure those people were protected and the patients were protected, and put policies in place. And
okay, so why don't we walk through some of the books that you've written, and maybe take it in chronological order. What I'd really like you to share, if you could, with the audience, is to what was the impetus of the book, and what messages did you hope to convey to the reader?
So my first book, Lean Culture Change, which I have a copy here, to back up a little bit, what I learned from Roger and David and Doc Kunkel was this thing called the transformation curve. So basically, after Roger left Toyota, went to General Motors, went to Bombardier Aerospace, he took the Toyota production system and put it on paper and said, okay, if I have to do the Toyota production system in a brownfield environment, a different environment, what tools would I put in place first? What's the order? So he created this it's called the transformation curve, and phase 1, level A, is essentially this book here. So I write about daily huddles, problem solving 1, balanced scorecards, 5S, safety systems. And I took an approach where it's really a nuts and bolts approach. And this is, if you're a manager, this is exactly how to set up a daily management system. Now, it might not be the daily management system that X, Y, or Z hospital system is putting in place, because they can make their own adaptations, but it's still a pretty good nuts and bolts. And I've got hospital systems that are using it to train their managers in operational excellence. And that was the whole point of the book. So, okay.
So a lot of it has to do with just the basic blocking and tackling involved in implementing a lean program.
Yep.
Super.
Phase 1, level A.
Okay.
So it's really the beginning stages, which is still a couple years worth of work. So
it really is, and I'm glad you mentioned that too. A lot of these, folks that I come across, they think that, lean is some SKU you can pull off the shelf and just plug into your business. And, they think that, just because they've made the decision to implement, that it's actually done. And they don't, I believe, fully appreciate the level of effort it takes to implement and to perpetuate. And I think that sometimes is a cause of friction. Why can't we get more done quicker kind of attitude?
Yeah. It's kind of comical. Is some places that'll just hire a lean or operational excellence manager and say, okay, go do it. And then say, okay, we're doing lean. We've done it. We've got the guy in place. And that's, that's really not how it works. So
yeah. And you've got to work at converting the knowledge from the front of the brain to the back of the brain, so that it's just the way they do things, as opposed to having to necessarily think about it, just the natural way they operate.
Yeah. And that takes years. Dave Adams, one of my mentors, always called it muscle memory.
Yeah.
It's like swinging a baseball bat or swinging a golf
Right.
club. You've got to practice. And with problem solving, one of the reasons in this book I teach about the problem solving sheet is so there's a standard for identifying the problem, identifying the 5 whys, identifying the countermeasures, so that years down the line, people think they think in terms of problem, root cause, countermeasure. How am I going to check to make sure it doesn't happen again? But it takes a while to get to that. So
now your second book was actually sort of a summary or workbook with the first one, associated with the first one.
Yeah, it's called The Executive Guide to Lean Culture Change. And, throughout this first book, there's all kinds of, let's see if I can find one. There's colors, there's pictures. It's a big book. So I just made it a smaller book for, maybe board members or executives that don't necessarily need to know the complete nuts and bolts the way that I've written them in the bigger book. They've got to know their adaptation of the system, but they might not need to know my details. So I wrote it for them. You said it is available on Amazon?
Yep. I looked them all up today, in fact, and they're all available on Amazon.
I thought I took it down because people were getting confused between the executive guide and the regular lean culture change. So just make sure, if somebody goes to buy one, that they're looking to make sure they buy the one that they want. Yeah,
right. Now, that led eventually to your third book. Now, your cadence for books was, roughly 18 months, it looks like.
Well, the executive guide was pretty easy to put together because it was just essentially a summary of the other books. So, and then the second book, Why Lean Transformation Fails, it's not all original content. I took some articles, paid for them, of course, to reprint, and put those in there and tried to make it a summary of different aspects of why lean transformation or why operational excellence fails.
Right.
Sometimes that title gets some pushback, and I was recommended to not do that because it sounds negative. But if you're a lean thinker, if you're in operational excellence, there's this saying, problems are blessings. You want problems so that you can identify what happened and learn from it. So that's the whole point of why lean transformation fails. I found different failures or, implementations that didn't go the way that they were supposed to go, and wrote about those. And I went across, the book is in order of a lean implementation. So starting with lean transformation, going to the pilot hall, spreading, sustaining. And I tried to pick those buckets so that people could read it and figure out, okay, what might go wrong in this next phase of implementation, and learn from it before it happens, learn from other people's mistakes before, you repeat the same mistakes.
So I just got to ask, because it kind of begs the question, have you ever heard of a lean program that did go according to plan?
That went according to plan?
Yeah, that was actually rolled out according to plan.
Not too often, So there's, and I think there's been a lot of successful implementations that people have gone back years later, and it's fallen apart. Don't quote me on that. I've read about it. I've read about it in the Baldrige world, where people will win Baldrige and then they go back in, years later, and a lot of the things fell apart. But on the positive side, I know, at least with the implementations that I've been involved in, some have been huge, some have been very small. There's some tools that, like the Daily Huddle, for example, that rarely ever goes away. Once it's put in place, the communication, it takes about a month for people to get used to it. But once you really put a good daily meeting in place, it tends to stick. So
I find that when there's a regime change, that's when the inflection point occurs, whether or not a program is going to remain or become successful, or whether it's going to falter. And I think that it's up to the, directors of operational excellence, assuming they're not the ones that leave, but assuming that they're the ones that stay, to make sure that when there is a regime change, they make sure they get on the calendar of the new leadership and find out what's important to the new leadership. Otherwise, there's going to be a lack of alignment, because the alignment that is established is the alignment at the time of the inception of the program. And, business factors change. The business cycle is always a cycle. And I think there's peril when the leadership changes and there's not an attempt to make sure that alignment is also maintained. The other challenge, of course, is if there's a new director of operational excellence, they want to put their own flavor, stamp, or bring forward their experiences, good, bad, and indifferent, and try to inject that into the program, and that might have negative consequences also if it's not managed properly.
Yeah, I've learned the hard way doing that too. And what I know now is when you go into a new industry or a new business, you've got to look at what are they really doing well, what are their current requirements from a quality improvement standpoint, and try to mesh those things together before you just, like, I wouldn't want to start in a new company and take this book and say, okay, we're going to do this,
right?
Because it may not be the right thing. Right. Now, the spirit of every tool is the same. The spirit of a transformation may be the same, but when you get down to the nuts and bolts, the language is important too. You and I might not think the language is that important, but when you go to communicate it to a frontline employee or a manager that's been in the business for 20 years and you start talking this Japanese lingo, it tends to turn people off. Some people like it, but there's got to be a standard language so that everybody's speaking the same words, so that you can move transformation a little bit faster.
And of course, in the healthcare industry, the language is a lot different than in manufacturing.
Yeah, it is. They
don't talk about production as much as they talk about outcomes and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's some commonalities and there's a lot of differences, especially when it comes to the metrics and processes.
Right.
I always like taking, swapping leaders. So if you take a healthcare person, take them to a manufacturing site and say, can you apply this? And they usually can. So that's always fun doing that.
And you have a last book, a fourth book, correct?
Yeah. So I just published this a few months ago, Sensei Secrets, Mentoring at Toyota Georgetown. And it's basically my dissertation. So I got my PhD. That probably took like 7 years or so to get that. And working on pretty much the book the entire time. Anytime I have to do articles or papers, I did it about Toyota, lean or operational excellence or leadership applications. So it was a work in progress for quite a long time. And what I did was I interviewed 7 former Toyota employees, most during the Georgetown ramp up, and talked about their experiences with their senseis, their Japanese mentors, primarily for the first couple of years. And Toyota, again, this coming from the guys who I interviewed, they had the cream of the crop senseis the first 3 or 6 years. Not that the other ones weren't good, but it was such a big undertaking for Toyota to start Georgetown, the largest plant in the world for Toyota, that they weren't going to let anything get screwed up. So
yeah. Now, you think about Toyota and just in time. There's been a lot of challenges because of the disruptions in the supply chain. I don't know if you're in tune with that, given that you're in the elder care field now and have been for a while. But how has the Toyota, if you know at all, how's the Toyota production system held up under the strain of supply chain disruptions?
I haven't really been following it, but I know just in general, the car shortage, I'm sure Toyota's having the same problem with the chips in the cars. And, I've got some side businesses. I've got a side business where I import saddles, and I was supposed to have these saddles a while ago, but containers are so expensive right now because, I think it's partly because of what happened last year. Now we've got the demand of last year's supply chain problems affecting this year's. At least I know that's what happened in my case. So
now, are you talking about English saddles or Western saddles?
Western saddles.
Western saddles. All right. So, do you get those from where? Mexico or overseas?
I get some from Mexico, some from India. and we just started. Found some Amish down in Tennessee to make them for us too, because I can't do one piece flow.
Yeah,
If we're coming from India, you know what I mean? So
right.
I like this because I get to apply lean to it, which is one of the reasons why I got it. So
Yeah, a friend of mine owns a gigantic ranch just outside of Monterrey, Mexico. And I'll tell you what, some of the saddles that they have there in the paddock are just amazing. I mean, they're just so beautiful. So yeah, some real nice leather work down there. Not to digress, right? Now, you've mentioned something about a documentary too, right?
Yeah. So when I did this book here, Sensei Secrets Mentoring at Toyota Georgetown, I interviewed like seven employees. So when I interviewed them, for the dissertation, usually you just take a voice recorder, but with today's technology, I grabbed my camera and said, if I'm going to do voice, I might as well do video. And I put the documentary together. So it's available on Vimeo. I think it's like $2 or $3. I might make some shorter versions of it now, because it's well over an hour right now. But there's some pretty cool stories in there. One of my favorite stories is from Russ Scafferty, who is the former general manager, vice president. He was one of the first at Toyota Georgetown. Talks about what he believes to be the first house of TPS. So we've seen multiple versions of the house of TPS.
Right.
His really came out of Fujio Cho sent him. He wanted to do TPM, total preventative maintenance. So he sent him to Japan and said, okay, tell me where TPM fits into TPS, and I'll let you do TPM. Because I don't think he really wanted to do TPM from the beginning, Mr. Cho. But Russ came back and built the house and said, this is where TPM fits into TPS. And he showed it to him. And it's just a pretty cool story about the real world application of how the Toyota house came to be, at least how we think it came to be.
Now, does it end up looking like an Amish house where, they just keep on adding to it, or did they actually incorporate it into the Toyota house?
So this, I don't know if you can see that. It's very different than the house, but he started talking about this in the 80s, and he, early 90s, and he would go around and do these speeches. And then after that's when all these different houses started cropping up. So that's why we think most of them can be linked back to this house right here, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. Now, you said that video is available on Vimeo?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And easy to find? Maybe you'll shoot me a link to it, and I'll add it to the...
I'll shoot you a link. I think it's just vimeo.com/Sensei Secrets.
Okay. Great. Thanks for sharing that. So, just a little bit of the speed round here. You've walked the earth, you've done some very interesting things. You've written a book, or books, I should say. Now, it tells me that, your heart, if I could, be so bold, is really in teaching.
Yeah, it is.
It seems like you always want to collect and internalize and process knowledge, and then convey that knowledge onto others.
Yep. That's the goal. And that's my long-term plan, is to find a place to teach. So my PhD's in leadership. So I'd like to teach leadership and its application to the Toyota production system.
Awesome. Well, I think that you'd be very good at, from what I've seen.
Appreciate that.
So who were some of your mentors along your journey?
Roger Lewis was one of my mentors. I interviewed him in the book, so you can read more about him in the fourth book. He started at Toyota, went to General Motors, went to Bombardier. I helped him with some stuff with Bombardier Aerospace, which was pretty cool to go up to northern, I guess it's north of Montreal, and see the things that they've put in place. And I wasn't able to take any pictures or video, but they've got a very sophisticated operational excellence system based on Roger's journey, which is pretty cool to see.
Right.
So,
now, that was Bombardier Aerospace, not the jet skis or the Skidoos or things like that, right?
Well, he started at Can-Am
Okay.
at the Rotax over in Austria, which is the Skidoos, the Speedoos. And then he went to overall Bombardier. So it's in transportation, it's in aerospace.
They even make locomotives, don't they? Bombardier,
transportation. Yep.
Yeah.
They
Right.
Yep.
And so, who are some of your other mentors?
Dave Adams, who is the executive director of the system. I got to learn so much from David, from a leadership standpoint and from the transformation curve, that it's been, that was an experience. I haven't talked to him lately, but it was great working with him.
Cool. So if you had a do-over, I mean, this is always a little bit of a catch, but if you had a do-over, what would it be and why?
It would be, don't try to move so quickly, so far, so quickly. I would stay smaller and try to go deeper. When I look back on all the implementations, we made the mistakes of, everybody wanted a board. So we got everybody a balanced scorecard. Probably shouldn't have did that until we had the ability to go out and round and check. And I'm not talking about me as the operational excellence leader. I'm talking about the executives to make sure that they understood what they were looking for, seeing how to coach. And the best way I could have did that was focus more on the pilot hall to get things. By pilot, I mean the area of which we're going to implement the entire system, so that we can see a system together and not just parts and pieces scattered all over. So that would be my biggest mistake and do-over.
Yeah. I mean, you have these things in retrospect, right? You don't know that there's a better way until after you've been through it and you said, you know what, I could have done that a different way.
Yeah.
But that's all part of it, continuous improvement, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, learning from your mistakes or learning from suboptimal outcomes, or saying, geez, if I had done it this way or that way, I would have had a better result. And you bring that, wisdom forward. Wisdom is applied knowledge, right? Applied experiences. Bring it forward to your next opportunity.
Yep. That's why I wasn't afraid, even though people advised against it, of calling my other book, Why Lean Transformation Fails. It's because there's so many failures out there. And whether it's a temporary failure or permanent failure, there's so much we could do to learn from it and bring it back into the operational excellence lean community and say, okay, this was a sophisticated operational excellence system, and here's how we failed. Here's what we could have done differently, so that we as organizations can and leaders can move forward. It's not about speed, but the more you learn, the faster you can move without making the mistakes. So.
Right. So what's next?
I actually, from a book standpoint, this was years ago, before the dissertation. I sat down with Roger and said, we need to talk transformation curve. Let's put a book together. So I've got a book sitting on the shelf that's based on Roger's interviews and time with him that I'll probably publish soon. Like I said, I've kind of had it ready to go, but it's just been on the back burner for years, probably 4 years now. So awesome. That's what's next. I just have to go through it again and get with him. And, books are one of those things. You could work on it forever and try to have a perfect book, or you just get to the point where you say, okay, this is good. This conveys the knowledge good enough. Right. Let's make sure we edit it well and get it out there for people to read. So that's kind of the phase I'm at right now.
So for the practitioners out there, especially perhaps the early stage practitioners, other than maybe slowing down a little bit, do you have any words of wisdom for them?
Get a mentor that's been through it.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. All right, Steve. Well, thanks a lot for joining me today on State of Readiness. It's been a real great pleasure having you. And, I wish you all the success in the world. I'm sure that our paths will continue to cross over the course of time.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Right. Thanks, Steve. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to State of Readiness. You can discover more episodes and learn about the book written by Joseph Paris of the same title at www.state-of-readiness.com. You can learn more about Joseph Paris at www.josephparis.me/card.